Our next speaker is Julian Hernandez. He is an information designer and has been working for over 5 years in Colombia to help companies create great database solutions to their analytics problems. And outside of work, he loves sketching and Pimi, his pet rabbit. I love that. And here he is speaking live about how to use design thinking in dashboard creation. Welcome, Julian.
Hi,
Hi, good to see
hello.
you.
How's everyone? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, perfect. Then let me, because the here. Okay, I'll share my screen quite quickly. Thank you. Okay, yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I've been watching the conference. It's going great.
Mhm.
Uh, Thank you so much for everything. So here, I'm Julian. As Ali just mentioned, a little bit about me. Yes, I'm based in Colombia. It's a beautiful place. Like if you want to visit or want some like tips after the show, you can write to me. It's very beautiful. I have 5 years of experience in data visualization. My first three were more akin to data journalism, and the first two are more, and the last two are more on the business side of things. And lastly, I have a background in UX design. So that was like all of those practices of UX design were really ingrained into me for like some long 5 years. So that's that. But then let's start with the topic of this talk, which is how can we use design thinking into dashboard creation, or how can we really make use of this framework to help us really make more usable and better dashboards? Well, first of all, like what is design thinking? Design thinking, the important part is that it's a process. It's a process in which you seek to validate your ideas or like the issues your users are going to have. You really like empathize with them, you connect with them, interview them, and you challenge your assumptions, and then you go out to create a solution that you can prototype and test. It was very popular, like it was everywhere 10 years ago. You will hear it like in your soup. It was like, hey, this company is using design thinking, that company is using design thinking. Now it's kind of the standard. And it has these 5 steps, which are empathize, which is basically you go out, meet your users, meet the people that are going to be working with your dashboard in this case, and get to know what do they need. Then you define like what are the issues, what are the problems they are facing, and you ideate a solution, which is the next stage. Like, okay, this is going to be a dashboard that is going to be presented in X or Y way, and it's going to have like this and that characteristics. Finally, you go to the next step, which is prototype. You go and you make the a version of your dashboard, maybe in paper, maybe in other prototyping tool, and you finally go out and test it in the wild or test it with your users, see how they react, and and if needed, you start over again, questioning your assumptions, defining maybe a better setup of frameworks or solutions, ideating a new like correction or adapting your dashboard, prototyping that, and testing it again. I think most of us here like have an understanding of what is a dashboard, but again, like what is a dashboard? A dashboard for me, it's a user interface designed to allow users to engage and explore datasets easily to find answers to their needs. Uh, it's not needed, for example, for it to have many graphs or like to be extremely complex. It's just an interface designed to allow people to get information they need and to get the answers they are requiring. For example, I really like the dashboards from the New York Times for tracking the coronavirus. They are simple. They give you very detailed information like are cases up, are cases down, how many people are vaccinated in your area. and I couldn't include like the whole dashboard, but they have pictures of like the hotspots in your area and some text on the right with latest trends. As you can see, this dashboard is very simple, but it works for what it's trying to do, which is to answer for people that don't have maybe that big of a data visualization knowledge, if the cases in their area are rising, falling, and how is all of that trending. And now, like maybe the important part, like this comic is by now already like a bit old. It's from 2019, and it's like a person showing like this new dashboard that the company did, and it has all the KPIs and all the metrics. But in the last panel, the person says like, "Hey, it seems like even though we are tracking all of these things and we have this dashboard with all of this information, it is now like we can't understand it. It's overloaded." So why do dashboards fail? For me, are the three main reasons. A variable overload. You want to put everything like in the dashboard. It's like for example, a child with a new toy. You want to play with it and put everything you can and just engage with it. But when you and that ends with a dashboard that is really filled with information, and it's nothing is being highlighted. Everything is just screaming for attention, so that you don't give attention to anything. And the second one is lack of focus. That is, for example, a dashboard that is meant to be, for example, a sales dashboard, but it's starting to include information from other areas as well. So it becomes not really that useful, which is also like the undefined goals and priorities. I'm going to move a little bit faster. But then, how can we fix that? Well, here is when we start using the design thinking part. We move into what we're going to group into the planning section, which is empathize and define. This is mainly like asking questions. So you have to understand the data. That's like a given. To really make anything working with data, you have to understand the data you're working with first, and then get to know your users, stakeholders. How can you do that? By making sure you know these 3 points: the pain points and wants of your users, your goals, their goals and expectations for this project, and the limitations. So some questions that are really important to ask when working through this process is, what questions do you want this dashboard to answer? Usually when you ask this in a meeting or something, they will give you a very long list, and then comes the second question, like which ones are the priorities? Like it's not the same, for example, to know are we getting enough sales to turn a profit? Is district A selling enough? One has a priority, and maybe the second one is important, but it's less important, so you can not like stash it in a corner, but give it less relevance. With what purpose the dashboard is going to be used? I have found that most dashboards are used for 3 reasons: to analyze, for analysts to work on their day-to-day to see what trends or patterns are emerging from the data; to align, to, for example, have it in a team meeting and see how is the effort of the team coming up; or to present, for a manager or something, to go to the directives and say, hey, we're doing great. You see all these numbers are trending up, or hey, we're not doing that great. We might need an extra help in this area. The other one is also important because it gives you an idea. Like if there's a current solution, what is wrong with it? Why it's not working anymore? So you have like a floor to stand up and see how can you improve on what's already out there. Goals and expectations, like what are you searching with this dashboard? And this is very important because most of the time, dashboards are developed without this in mind. Like, what would it take for you to consider this dashboard a success? Like, oh, I want to have a lot of users. Like, I want our Salesforce to check this dashboard at least daily. So the number of daily views, of unique daily views that this dashboard has might be a good way to track its success. If you, for example, want to track analyst performance, you can go and say like maybe a little bit more of a qualitative data, like you go and interview the analyst and you say, what's your experience, your current experience working with data? And then after you do the dashboard, like do the same process again and see if there has been an improvement, maybe do some surveys, etc. And finally, we have the limitation. Who is the end user? What knowledge of analytics, database metrics do they have? And again, understanding the data. The data is a very hard limitation, like how much information do we have? Is it updated daily? Is it updated monthly? And the first one is more of a term of data literacy. So do your users are experts, can read any kind of chart you throw at them, or they are maybe not as data literate and you need to use the basic type of charts like bar charts, line charts, etc. It's very important also to have this in mind, because if you start to throw, I don't know, Sankey's to people that only deal with scatter plots and bar charts, you are very open to miscommunicating. So here you have two solutions. One is to educate your client or your teammates, and the second one is just to adapt to their current data literacy level. So to summarize this part, that it's very important to listen intently, to take notes during all of these questions and to the answers to all of these questions and these meetings. Ask questions, and then when you have the answer, if you have any doubt, ask them again. Like you can be a little bit bothersome, but it's worth it. Like getting this on paper, getting this like clear on your mind will help you develop something better. The second part is prototyping, in which I group the ideate and prototype sections. Here, the main idea is to gather everything you already did, like all of this planning and all of this information, and then create a mock-up of your idea. So, for example, here I recommend to start when you're first starting your mock-up in pen and paper. Then, why? Because it gives you a lot of freedom to create. If you can see here, for example, I was thinking about like this. This answers the question 1 and 2 that the client had or had. This one answered the question 3 and 4. This one answered the 5 and 6. Which filters do I need to use? Like a little bit of the thought process, like what's popular? Do we think that sales means popular, etc. And some of the different like graph types that I was exploring for example, this set of questions. This could be your first way to get your idea to paper and then iterate. Then we have, then we have Figma, that I think that's like got cut, which is a very, very strong tool for prototyping. It helps you get your ideas out in a more clean way and concise way. I recommend it over the other tools that we're going to see. And this helps you to get your dashboard in a more presentable way, because most clients, most people usually are not that comfortable with a paper sketch. So when you show it in Figma, at least if they are just squares and things like that, like different squares with maybe a bar chart that is just rectangles, etc. Not using real data, at least helps them visualize what the end product is going to see and give feedback a little bit easier. Finally, there are other tools like InVision, Sketch, Balsamic, or Adobe XD, which are great for this kind of process. And finally, like when you start prototyping, it's also at this moment that it's a good idea to validate your idea. So as your teammates for feedback, as your stakeholders, your teammates can give you, for example, more design database related advice or feedback. Your stakeholders might say like, hey, this, this, this is not what we need. This is too focused perhaps on analysis, or this is not as clear enough as we thought it would be, and correct. You do this before the next step, which is uh, like validate or develop, because when you're working with Figma and with paper, the cost of change is extremely low. But when you start touching software like Tableau, like D3 or things like that, the cost of changing or doing something else is like skyrocket. So it's important to, when you're validating your idea, to focus on the big picture first, like not focus on which colors do I need to change, is this font good, etc., etc. But is this graph helping you? Do you understand this graph? Do you understand what it's trying to say? Are the filters that I have included the ones that you were thinking about? Are they good enough? Do you need some perhaps extra information, a table? Are the KPIs clear enough? Do we need to set like more of this base stuff and not details like color, like font choice, because those are important, yes. But when you're designing the dashboard, the first part that you want to make sure that you have like set before moving to iterating on colors and on those things is a structure. First, you validate structure, then you validate color and font. Another very useful way to really check if your dashboard is useful is to hand them your prototype and to see them use it. To, for example, to see if they engage with it as you thought they will engage with it, if they are successful, if they perhaps have issues finding something that you thought was easy to find, etc. And again, it's very important to run your idea, run your prototype by your teammates and stakeholders. This will give you, like when you do it before this next step, it gives you time to change, which is what we have here, which is the work on the project, get Figma blank changes, rewind and try again. This is the, like really, this is the basic of design thinking, is the idea to not overcommit to a solution before testing it, validating it, starting again. So during this step, during the prototyping step, is the summary is first get ideas out of your head. Do not be afraid to sketch. Do not be afraid of using prototyping tools as Figma or the other ones we presented. Show your work. Do not be afraid of feedback. Like show your work as much as you can to like anyone that would listen. Start with structure, with simple, and then build up to complex. Like start with boxes, and maybe here you go like chart, filter, and then start adding, like for example, the real text, the real graph, etc. That way you can validate things like a structure first, and then things like chart choice, color, fonts later. And too much of a good thing, I personally think in the real world, like 2-3 sessions of, or 2-3 rounds of iteration is quite a lot. Most of the time that's the amount I do like on my day-to-day work. More than 2 or 3, I don't think it's that viable because they're like time scheduled. It's very hard, so you really have to make those 2 to 3 sessions count to make them real useful. And then when you validate that prototype and everyone has given like the okay, you move to the next part, which is like validate. You develop your idea, and you go back to the first part in which you ask what was the goal of this dashboard, what were the success conditions that you need to classify it as successful, and you start to see if these conditions were met. So, for example, at work we have a tool, Tableau server, that allows us to see how many people are seeing the dashboard, what are, for example, the trends, who is seeing the dashboard. So if my goal were, for example, to see if directives are using the dashboard on their decision-making plans, if I see the directives using the dashboard fairly often, like at least once a week, I might say this dashboard was a success. If I want to see like if all the Salesforce is using the dashboard, I might say if 75% of the Salesforce is using this dashboard monthly at least once, I will classify it as a success. It's really important on the first steps to really set those conditions on stone. So then when it's time to see if your dashboard was successful, you can very like clearly say, yes, my dashboard was successful, and congratulations, you have now a successful dashboard that is being shared by its users, or no. And then you have to go back to the planning stage, try again, and do better. So go back, check your assumptions that maybe you got through the planning stage, through the interviews, check what maybe was not aligning with reality, correct those assumptions, and start the whole process, like the mock-ups, the prototyping, the developing, and then again, validate your idea. So during this process, it's important to develop your prototype, which I really simplified it on this presentation because the idea was the design thinking process itself, but it's very, very important. Like to do this project on Tableau, on D3 is not easy, but then develop your prototype into the end product, check the goals, check if they were met, do they meet expectations, and if not, rewind or maybe celebrate. And as I was mentioning, this is very like theoretical. I have used this approach in my work a bunch of times. Usually, as I mentioned, you have to set a limit for the number of iterations that you're willing to do and that your company is willing to take, because it will be ideal to iterate forever, but usually you can't iterate forever. So around 2 or 3 iterations is ideal. And to really commit to this idea of the dashboard is not really done. It's always in the process of like needing changes or like needing things to be adapted to it, etc. So work with that in mind, work with the idea that even though, like, for example, you finish a dashboard now, it will need to be adapted, and you would need to check with your users like a couple of months later to see if it's working correct, and start, for example, the process again. And that's it. Thank you very much, and I'm open for like the Q&A.
Woo! Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Really, really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for giving that talk today. We're a little bit behind schedule, so I'm just going to ask one question. In fact, I'm not even going to ask it. It was Gabby's question, so I'm going to bring Gabby up. Here she is. Hi, Gabby.
Magic. Hi. Thank you, Julian. That was really awesome. Thank you so much. I had one question at the feedback level when you're getting the feedback on the prototypes and all those moments. What happens? I think in the people you ask feedback, you were like the client, but also your teammates. But what happens if you don't have teammates? If you're working solo as a freelancer or independent contractor, what would you recommend for one of those situations? Like who should I ask feedback to?
Like it depends. For example, usually at my work, I have very talented people that are not database experts, but when I can, for example, when I have a doubt in fonts, colors, they are not the people that I would go to help. Sometimes my significant other is a designer, so I would go like, hey, does this look good to you? And she goes like, no, or yes, that looks great, or hey, I think that green is a little bit, I don't know, like too green. So it's not necessarily like just sometimes getting somebody else's opinion on something you're working is eye-opening enough. Like if you don't have teammates, maybe if you're working alongside with somebody in a co-working or something like that, or if you have a family member nearby that you can show maybe a version without live data or something like that, it's good enough in those cases. Ideally, like it would be like teammates or people that know like the context of the project. But if that's not possible, that's good enough.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. All right. Then it is time for our next speaker, though.